Part 1, Introduction. Hi everyone, welcome back to Saguaro Sunday. If you're new here, Saguaro Sunday is a weekly opportunity to slow down and reflect on the week. Every Sunday, I share what I'm grateful for, what I've been learning, what's been on my mind, and how I hope to continue growing in the week ahead. This week's video is going to be a little bit different. I wasn't able to film last week's Saguaro Sunday reflection, so instead of skipping it, I decided to combine the last 2 weeks into a longer reflection. So that means that this week we will have 2 bloom sections, or in other words, 2 little mini essays. The first is about grief and an analogy that helped me to put into words something that I've been struggling to understand. The second is about internal family systems, or IFS, a type of psychotherapy that completely changed the way I've been thinking about myself over the past couple of weeks. Those topics might seem unrelated, but the longer I sat with them, the more I realized that they actually do go hand in hand. Both are about learning to approach ourselves with a little more curiosity, compassion, and gentleness. So as the YouTubers say, grab a cup of coffee, grab some tea or whatever. This one might be a little bit longer. As always, my hope is that while you listen, you'll also take some time to reflect on your own week. So I encourage you to grab a notebook, a piece of paper, or even open up the Notes app on your phone and follow along. Throughout the video, I will have a few journal breaks, or as I've been thinking of them, Dora the Explorer moments, where I'll invite you to pause the video and write down your own reflections before we move on. Don't worry, I won't awkwardly stare at you. All right, let's get started. Part 2, this week's gratitude, my village. As always, I'm grateful for my job, my home, my health, my family, and of course, Coco. But over these past couple of weeks, I've been feeling especially grateful for my village, my friends. Last weekend, the reason probably why I didn't end up filming is because my friend Marissa and I ended up going out dancing 2 nights in a row. Definitely not something that I would do every weekend, but we had such a great time. She had originally bought tickets for us to go to a 2000s themed dance night on Friday night, and then I somehow won tickets to a disco themed dance night on Saturday. Shout out to the Rebel Lounge in Phoenix. Thank you guys. I had been wanting to go to a disco night for the longest time, and I knew it was going to be a really tiring weekend, but I figured if I don't go now, who knows when another one will come around. Thankfully, Marissa was completely on board. I've always loved dancing, but mostly in private. Picture me doing just dance workouts alone in my living room. I never intentionally went out dancing when I was in college or throughout most of my 20s. It wasn't until I turned 30 that I started to say yes to these kinds of experiences. The first dance night I went to was actually with my friend Marissa. It was a Chapel Roan themed dance night because we both love her music. Since then, we've gone to a couple more girly pop dance nights, and now last weekend, we went to those 2 dance nights. One thing that surprised me the first time I went out dancing a couple years ago was that I was just so surprised that I could dance for 3 hours straight. I didn't think I had it in me. And never once did I feel self-conscious. I didn't really think about what other people were thinking about me. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't worried about looking cool. I was just having fun. And that feeling of freedom was something that I hadn't realized that I was missing. I'm grateful not only to Marissa for helping me reconnect with that joyful, carefree part of myself, but also for the example that she and her boyfriend set. Watching them has reminded me that healthy love isn't about keeping tabs on each other. It isn't about limiting each other's joy. It's about trust. It's about encouraging each other to have rich and full lives. It's the kind of relationship where after a night of dancing, the biggest concern isn't jealousy or suspicion, but if you'll be able to wake up the next morning and go to Costco together. I love you guys. All right, so fast forward to 1 week, the current weekend. My gratitude for my village only continues to grow. My car's air conditioning has been broken all summer, and here in Arizona, that's kind of a big deal. So I finally took it to the dealership, and good news is that it might be covered by an extended warranty. The bad news is that they might take forever to fix it. I took it in on Thursday, and I thought I would have it ready by this weekend. And of course, this happened on a weekend when I had plenty of things planned. Dinner with friends, shopping, church, trivia, a birthday party, and groceries. Basically, everything required a car. And without hesitating, my village stepped in. One friend picked me up for dinner on Friday. Another took me grocery shopping after dinner. And seriously, she's amazing because who wants to go shopping at Walmart on a Friday night after some margaritas? Another friend drove all the way to my house from the other side of town so that we could still spend some time together and also run some errands together on Saturday. 2 more friends picked me up yesterday evening to go to a birthday party. And finally, another friend picked me up this morning to take me to church and go with me for the first time. On paper, these might just seem like rides, but to me, they're reminders that I'm surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, people who want to spend time together, people who show up. And it reminded me that community isn't something that we just hope to have someday. It's something that we need to build, little by little, ride by ride, conversation by conversation, showing up for one another. There's a saying I really love: if you want a village, you have to be a villager. I hope that when the roles are reversed, and they always are eventually, I can also be that kind of friend who shows up for others. All right, journal break. This is our Dora the Explorer moment where I stare awkwardly at you. Just kidding. If you got a notebook, or again, even just your notes app, this is your invitation to pause the video and reflect on a couple of questions. So I shared my story about dancing bringing me joy. What's something that's been bringing you joy lately, even if life has been difficult? Who has been part of your village lately? How have they shown up for you? And how have you been a villager for someone else? Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like. Part 3.1. Last week's bloom. An analogy for grief. Lately, my mind keeps coming back to trying to wrap my head around the feeling of grief. It's a feeling that I've been getting more acquainted with since the year started. I guess you could say that I'm blessed, that it's a feeling that hasn't come to visit me too much throughout my life. Honestly, this is not going to be a completely nice and neat reflection because I'm still learning. I've really only been able to start noticing and naming my emotions since I turned 30 a couple of years ago. And even though I have started this practice of name it to tame it, there have been many times when I can recognize that grief is present, but it hasn't really helped me to tame it. My instinct is to panic and to try to just get rid of the feeling. So that's why I'm trying to learn more about this feeling and to let it do its thing without spiraling. There's a creator that I would love to highlight. I started following her this year. Her name is Nasima B. She has a master's degree in psychology. She's an artist and a somatic coach. She shares her gentle art online where she often personifies emotions. Think kind of like Inside Out. Her art is an invitation for us to sit with our feelings and to give them the opportunity to say what they have to say. Her art has really helped me not to be so scared of negative emotions like fear and grief. Again, I really recommend that you check out more of her work if you're also on a similar journey of learning to welcome all emotions and listening to them. This year, I also heard the saying, grief is love with nowhere to go. And that really made sense to me. And it led me to me exploring this feeling in my own way. So I wrote a poem of sorts that I'd like to share with you. Again, it's not going to be a perfect analogy, but this was the closest that I could come to explaining a feeling that is just so hard to put into words. I have heard it said that grief is love with nowhere to go. Well, yes. And maybe it's also this. Love is a game of hot potato where you and someone you love laugh and toss it back and forth. Neither of you notices how hot it really is because you're carrying it together. Then one day they stop playing and suddenly you're left holding the potato by yourself. It burns. You want to set it down. You want someone else to take it. People tell you you have to let it go, but it's not that simple. It's not just a potato. It's every conversation, every memory, every future you thought you'd have. So you hold it because how could you not? Some days a friend comes along and lends you an oven mitt. For a little while, the heat feels bearable. But when they go, you still wonder if the pain will always be this sharp. Sometimes the potato seems to cool down, but without warning, it feels like it's 1,000 degrees all over again. A song, a smell, a place, a date on the calendar. You don't always know why. Over time, the potato doesn't stop being hot, but your hands begin to heal. You learn how to hold it. You discover that you can still laugh while carrying it. You can still dance. You can still love. And maybe that's what healing is. Not letting go of the potato, but learning that your life can become bigger than the pain of holding it. Part 3.2. This week's bloom. The village within and listening to our inner parts. All right, thank you for listening to that. Now for the second bloom of this week. Over the past couple of weeks, I have fallen down another psychology rabbit hole. This time, it's a form of psychotherapy called internal family systems, or IFS. And I genuinely think that, at least for me, it might be one of the most practical psychological frameworks I've come across. The basic idea is pretty simple. IFS suggests that we're all made up of different parts of ourselves that each have their own role. There are exiles, which are the younger, wounded parts of us that carry painful emotions and all hurts. There are managers, the parts that work really hard to keep us safe by staying in control, planning ahead, people-pleasing, striving, or trying to prevent us from getting hurt in the first place. And then there are firefighters. These parts jump in whenever those painful emotions become overwhelming, and they try to make them stop as quickly as possible. Sometimes in healthy ways, sometimes in unhealthy ways. According to IFS, all of these parts are actually trying to help us. They just have different strategies, and sometimes those strategies end up conflicting with one another. But underneath all of those parts is something called the self, like the capital S self. The self is calm, compassionate, grounded, curious. It's the part of us that isn't driven by fear. The role of IFS isn't to get rid of our parts or to decide that some of them are bad. It's to understand why they developed, appreciate how they've been trying to protect us, and to help them to trust the self enough to let it take the lead. Again, I have to say that this framework has helped me to understand myself in a way that years of reading and consuming psychology content hadn't quite managed to do for me. Again, I want to be clear, I am not a therapist. Therapy is actually not financially accessible for me right now. So that's why I spend a lot of time reading and watching videos about different psychological approaches and reflecting on how they apply to my own life. I think the other reason why this framework really clicked with me is because, I majored in English and I have spent so much time analyzing fictional characters. Why do they make the choices that they make? What are they afraid of? What happened to them? How do they grow? Watching that character arc. IFS basically invites us to approach ourselves with that same curiosity. So instead of asking, what's wrong with me? It asks, why is this part trying so hard to protect me? And I just think that's a very compassionate shift. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the stages of change. And looking back, I realized that I'm living them again. I spent about 2 weeks in the preparation stage, reading about IFS and trying to understand it. Then on Monday morning, I finally moved into the action stage. I had skipped my morning pages the day before, so I decided to write 6 pages instead of my usual 3. I also decided that instead of just reading about IFS, I was going to finally try it. So I sat down with my journal and I started with a question around something that has been causing me pain. And I asked myself, what am I afraid will happen if I do X or if I don't do X? Almost immediately, a protector part stepped forward and said, you'll be alone. Instead of arguing with that voice, I thanked it. Then I asked, why do you believe that? That question led me to a much younger part of myself, the exile, a child part. And from a calmer place, I was able to tell her, you're safe. We have a home. I looked around my room and I said, we have Coco. She's on the bed right now. We have a village. We have family. And finally, I am here. The adult me, the capital S self, is here. So in that moment, I realized something that felt incredibly freeing. I didn't need to get rid of that frightened part of me. It wasn't the enemy. It was just scared. It just needed to know that it wasn't alone anymore. So that journaling exercise gave me enough clarity and confidence to make a decision that had been weighing on me. But more than that, it made me feel like I had another tool that I could come back to whenever I feel stuck. So one other thing that I've been thinking about relating to this, and I don't know if anybody else experiences this, reaching that place of self reminded me a little bit of what many spiritual traditions describe when they're talking about listening for God's voice or the Holy Spirit. Not because I think that they're the same thing, but because both invite us to respond from a place of peace rather than fear. Honestly, I've always struggled with that idea. People say, just listen for God's voice. And I think how? It has just always felt so abstract to me. And maybe because I'm such a practical person, having an actual framework, a path to help me quiet everything else and reconnect with that calmer and wiser part of myself has been incredibly comforting. Now, I don't know if IFS is going to resonate with everyone. In fact, mental health professionals don't use this approach with all patients. For example, if somebody suffers from schizophrenia, maybe this isn't appropriate for them. But anyway, every person is different and no one therapeutic approach is the answer for everyone. But if you've ever felt like different parts of yourself are pulling you in opposite directions, I think this framework is worth looking into, ideally with the guidance of a trusted therapist, if that's accessible to you. So if you'd like to learn more about IFS, I recommend you check out Dr. Tori Old's playlist on YouTube. You can also go to this page on Psychology Today, which gives an overview and can even help you connect with a licensed therapist. Or you can also check out the IFS Institute's website. Whether or not I continue with IFS specifically, it has reminded me of something I don't want to forget. Understanding ourselves isn't about judging the parts of us that are hurting. It's about listening to them with curiosity and compassion. All right, it's the next journal break. So I encourage you to spend a few minutes reflecting on this question. What's one part of yourself you've been learning to understand with more compassion? Maybe it's your anxious part, perfectionist, your inner child, the part that's lonely, the part that's afraid, whatever comes to mind. See if you can approach that part with curiosity instead of judgment. Go ahead and pause if you'd like. Part 4. This week's Wonder Rapid Fire Edition. It was a busier week at work, and I've been spending most of my free time looking into IFS and consuming a lot of also art content online. Because of that, this week's rabbit holes list is a little shorter than usual. However, I do want to share one big thing that I learned this week. This might be a little upsetting. So I learned that the BBC recently released a documentary about Jared Leto and about the SA allegations against him. I'll probably write about this in length another time because this has me thinking about celebrity culture, accountability, and what it means to reassess people who we once admired. If you know me, and the reason why I'm sharing this is because if you know me, it's so cringe to say, I used to be a huge fan of Jared Leto. But over the past couple of years, not only has his quality of work just tanked, but I started hearing these rumors about him online. And they just, made me feel icky. So I've distanced from supporting him. And after learning more this week, I still haven't seen the documentary, but I will. I just want to reiterate that I no longer support him, and I do believe these women. Okay, on a lighter note, I watched a podcast where the garden nerd spoke, and I learned that it's possible to grow tropical fruit in Arizona, like mango trees. I also learned that in Arizona, it's maybe also better to water trees deeply for longer periods of time so that the water can reach the roots and not stay just on the surface level and get hot and maybe rot the roots. And finally, I learned that ASU will offer a BA in content creation, basically a degree for social media influencers. And I know when people are making fun of it, but to be honest, I don't think it's a bad idea. If there's already marketing degrees out there, I think there's some value in teaching people how to market themselves, not necessarily just to peddle trash, but maybe also teaching people the skills to be able to do proper brand deals, not get taken advantage of. So I put these lists together by looking through my Instagram history, my TikTok history, my YouTube history, Google searches, what people have sent me this week. And again, it's kind of crazy to do this kind of inventory or whatever into what I've been learning, but I find it helpful to know what I've been spending my time on. So I encourage you, not necessarily to do the same thing, but to stop for a moment and think about what you've learned this week. What have you been consuming online? Go ahead and share it in the comments. Part 5, next week's growth. Like I said, work has been getting busier. So my goal is just to maintain my usual habits. The morning pages, the yoga, exercise, etc. I do still want to work on making some free worksheets to share, but honestly, I'm just happy that I'm recording this today, and I'll be happy if maybe I can do one more Instagram reel or TikTok throughout the week. What will you be focusing on this week? I hope you've shared some answers to the questions I asked throughout the video. I look forward to reading them and to continuing the conversation down in the comments. Thank you so much for spending part of your day here with me today. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing if you know someone who would be interested in joining this little online learning community. Until next time, learn a bit each day, bloom a little more. Bye. The potato. So stupid. It's not just a potato. So stupid.